I had been at work on the Friday after Thanksgiving. I worked at a credit union. So I wanted to go in and kind of be by myself and get some extra work done when there was nobody around, no customers or anything. So I went in and so it was time for me to take a lunch break. So I decided, and I'd always gone out to my car and scanned the radio, and I came across, I believe it was like an NPR interview with a man that had just written a book called Final Salute. And it was about casualty officers and their experiences going and telling family members that their service member had been killed in action. And I thought, oh, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to listen to this one. So I looked around for another thing to listen to, and I went right back to it, and I said, I want to listen to this. So I'm hearing them describe how this is done, and I in great detail. I mean, it was a very moving uh, interview, and he described, uh, it's always somebody, a casualty officer that is at least one rank above the service member, dressed in their dress blues or whatever their dress uniforms, not blues, but and they always show up in an official vehicle and carry a Bible. And so I had this picture. Okay, that's what it's like. Wow. And so literally a week later, practically, December 5th, I'm in bed. It's early morning my time. Leah's a couple hours ahead of me. And I'm laying there, and Leah and I had been on the computer the night before, doing some Christmas shopping and talking back and forth. And I said, hey, have you talked to Elijah lately? And she said, yeah, she said he was, because they were able to do a video call. And she said, yeah, he was, or not a video, because they were able to do that in Iraq, but the ability to really communicate was much less in Afghanistan. So it's more like a chat, just text chatting. So he was on and they text chatted, and then he said, hey, I've got to go. I have to go out on patrol. And he left the chat open. And Leah said that he just never came back from that chat. And I'm like, well, we just sort of, encouraged each other and then went to bed. Well, about probably 7:30 my time, I had my phone on my nightstand and it rang. And so I like bolted awake and I pick it up and I can't even say hello. I hear this screaming, just this, I've never heard screams like this. And I'm everything went through my mind like somebody's being murdered, what's happening? And I yelled into the phone. I said, stop. I said, what's happening? Tell me what's happening. And it was Leah, and she immediately calmed down and she said, I got a call from the Army and they want to come and see me. And I said, okay. I said, tell me what they said. And she said, they called me because I wasn't at the address that they thought I would be at. I'm at my mom's. And I said, okay, what did they say? And I said, okay, we started telling each other, okay, that means he's probably just injured, because they would show up in person. I knew that they would show up in person if it was a fatality. And I said, maybe he's just injured. So we spent a few moments trying to bring each other down from this hysteria. And I said, how long would it take them to get there, do you think? And she gave me a time frame, just a few minutes. I said, okay, well, keep me on the phone. So she went to the door and she stepped out and I said, she stepped out onto the walkway, and I said, so can you see anything? She said, yeah, there's a uh, it's a official Army van. And so I suddenly start remembering from a week ago what was so vividly described to me. And I said, she said, and then she starts, and I kept telling her, tell me what you see, tell me what you see. And she said, there are two of them. They're in their Class A uniforms. And she said, and one's carrying a Bible. And I was, at that point, I was still in my bed. And when I heard that, I don't know how or why, but I was on the floor. I was on the floor at that point. And she just, and I heard the man say, the secretary, are you Leah Rayo, the wife of, Elijah Rayo? And she must have nodded because I didn't hear anything audible. And he said, the secretary of the army, he gave the whole, spiel, regrets to inform you. And she just screamed and collapsed. And I screamed and collapsed. And I was on the floor. I don't know for how long. But then suddenly I became aware that, oh my God, they're going to come to my door. They're going to come to my door. And I just told my husband, we have to leave. I said, we have to leave. I want to be the one to tell my children. I want it to be me to tell them, especially my daughter. And so somehow pulled myself together. And my husband called my daughter's husband and said, you need to get home. And he said, is it Elijah? And he said, yes. So we went, and I'll never forget going up to her door, and the top had windows, had glass, 3 panels of glass, and showed up at her door, and she peered over the window and saw that her mom's standing there. So she lit up, and I just realized then that, her world would never be the same. And it wasn't. None of our worlds were ever the same. And then I kept moving. I never wanted to stay because I didn't want them to catch up to me to tell me that. Something about, I knew it, but that would have been the period to the sentence. And I just didn't want to hear it because that would have made it true. So then we went to my son's house and, did the same thing, let him know. And then I went to, I think I talked to my brother, and so my journey was to get to my mom's house. And so I got to my mom's, and I went to the furthest room, the furthest corner in her house, on the floor with my head between a wall and her bed, and I just stayed there. And Kleenex wasn't enough. I had a kitchen towel. And I remember my brother coming in, I don't know how long it had been. He came in and he said, I knew that the casualty officers had found me, that had found me at my mom's. And I could tell that they were out there. And my brother came in and he knelt down beside me. He said, Sharon, these men have a job to do, and it's time. And I just said, no. And he said, yes. And so he helped. I couldn't stand up. He helped. I was still on the floor, and I was I couldn't look up. I was on the floor and I saw their shoes. I saw the man, I saw his pant legs, I saw his shoes, and he bent down and he told me, he gave me him, he did what he had to do. He said it. And I just kept saying, no, no, no. And crying into my towel. And he, at one point, said, can I use your towel? And so we both cried into my towel. And I came to find out later that it was his first casualty officer call that he had been on. But it affects many, many lives. A soldier's death. It's not just the family, it's the people that have to make those calls and show up. And I think it has ripples. And, but our family, I'm telling you, it was never the same. I mean, how could it be? An integral member of that family is not there anymore. He was just a wonderful, wonderful person from the moment he was born. In fact, when I found out I was pregnant, I knew it was going to be a boy. Don't ask me how I knew, but I just knew it. And wanted to name him Elijah. And he just, seriously, a dream of a boy to raise. He never gave me a bit of trouble. Such a sweet, sweet, gentle person. And you probably would have been shocked that he would show up saying, I'm going to join the army. I want to be on the front lines. I would not have seen that coming, but there it was. So just a wonderful person. He joined for all the right reasons. And we miss him.
Daisy.